Serious. What was the creepiest unexplainable paranormal thing you saw in the middle of the day? Years ago when I was about 14, I was laying on my bed in the middle of the afternoon. It was a beautiful summer day, and I had the windows open and was listening to music on my little stereo. I was the only one home at the time. I had a shelf on my wall that hung right above the head of my bed. My stereo was on it along with a few other knickknacks. For some reason, out of the blue, I feel the need to go brush my teeth. So I get up, head into the bathroom and start brushing. Moments later, I hear a huge crash coming from my bedroom. So I go running back into my room to find the entire shelf, stereo, and all had fallen off the wall and was laying across my pillow where my head has been just moments ago. I stood there absolutely stunned for what seemed like forever. So I just cleaned everything up and moved my shelf. To this day, I make darn sure there's nothing hanging above mine or my children's beds. I'm not a religious person, but I definitely feel like something or someone was watching over me that day. At university, I lived in a shared house. There were 6 of us in total. One afternoon, 5 of us are sat in the lounge, and we hear the front door open, then close. The letterbox even did its little rattle. We heard the footsteps go up the stairs and into the bathroom right above the living room. We assumed it was the 6th girl who needed the toilet before coming into the lounge, and we all acknowledged that we heard the door and footsteps, etc. Anyway, about 15 minutes later, the front door opens again, and the 6th girl comes in, straight into the living room. We all freaked out a bit. Someone went to investigate upstairs and there was nobody there. Nobody could have left the bathroom through the window, as we would have seen them through the lounge window. The 6th girl had been in a lecture, so she hadn't come and gone, and we didn't hear footsteps coming back down the stairs. The noises were very distinct, and all 5 of us heard them. Gives me heebie-jeebies to this day. When I was in high school, I was responsible for getting myself to school as everyone in my home left very early in the morning for work. My alarm didn't go off this morning, and I jumped up in a frenzy when I realized I was running quite late. I went straight to the bathroom and was brushing my teeth, and I heard very clearly, "You're going to be late." It came from the hallway, and it sounded like a woman speaking very firmly, like I was being scolded. The house was completely empty except for me. I was caught off guard, of course, and looked out into the hallway and nothing. I go back to what I was doing thinking I didn't hear what I just heard. It didn't make any sense, so I tried to ignore it. Just as I felt calm again, the stereo in my dad's room turned on and started playing music at full volume. I walked to his room and stood in the doorway looking around. Naturally, I was pretty freaked out again, but told myself the stereo must have an alarm feature and it's going off right now, but no. When I turned off the stereo, I see there is no alarm setting on the thing. The rest of my life in that house, I never experienced anything strange. This was over 10 years ago, but I can still recall the sound and tone of the voice so clearly. When I still lived with my dad, we had a whole other living room upstairs, which is where I spent my time. I was sitting up there with my boyfriend and brother. Out of the corner of my eye, I saw a teenage guy with a baseball hat on come up the stairs and go into my brother's room. My boyfriend also noticed him, and we went to go see who it was. There was no one in my brother's room. No way back down the stairs without passing us. No other way out of that room. When I was young, I used to stay in my grandmother's home in Jamaica Ave, Brooklyn. One day I was playing in the backyard, riding a red and yellow tricycle which was made of plastic. I remember the sound of the wheels on the concrete as I rode in circles while my mother watched over me. In the furthest part of the backyard, there was a garage which belonged to my then deceased grandfather. As I played, both I and my mother got startled by an extremely loud roar and a bang against the garage door. I remember falling over due to how hard the door was hit. The roar seemed like a manifestation of pure hate and anger, almost like a tiger's roar, but deeper. I remember my mother picking me up, panicked and running inside the house to get my uncle. I remember my uncle running out with a bat and opening the garage to the surprise that the garage was clear. No one was inside the padlocked garage, and nothing had fallen over with such force to hit the door that hard. I remember my uncle challenging whatever made that sound, but the garage was empty in the middle with just some tools, which were neatly placed on hooks around the walls. I have 2. The first one, I didn't see anything in daylight, but heard it. As a kid, my parents got divorced, but my mother, brother, and I stayed in the house that I grew up in. My dad moved out on his own, so it was just us 3. We had a converted attic space, so the staircase that would have gone up to the attic led up to a bonus room. That staircase had a door attached, so it wasn't just an open staircase, and it was in the mudroom that led out to the garage. That bonus room had basically become my brother and I's playroom. We had all of our game stuff up there as well as our computers. Well, one day my mom comes by and opens up the door to the stairway and yells up the stairs that she's going out to get cigarettes and she'll be back. We said, okay. And she left. I know she left because the room is above the garage and I heard the garage door open and her car start and pull away. As soon as we heard her leave, my brother jacks up the music on his computer because we usually weren't allowed to listen to it that loud. Suddenly, we hear the door to the stairway fly open and my mother's voice yell, "Y'all turn that down." We both looked at each other puzzled and I said, "Mom?" And heard the door close again. I went down to investigate and my mom's car was still gone and the door to the garage was closed. There shouldn't have been anyone else in the house. Asked my mom when she got back if she had come back home briefly and she said she hadn't. The story spooked her too because previously, the ghosts in our house hadn't been vocal. Second. Growing up, I took over my oldest sister's bedroom because she was much older than me and had moved out. She'd always said that room was haunted by a little girl. I was in my bedroom playing with my dollhouse and I had a habit of putting my head inside of the dollhouse rooms to look through the windows. I was very weird. I had put my head inside all of the rooms and when I got to the top room, I looked through the window and saw a little girl standing in front of the dollhouse. I only saw her hand and her dress, so it was as if she was standing in front of the dollhouse looking down at me. It appeared that she was white, but that her hands had dirt on them, and her dress was plaid and stopped just above her wrist where there was lace. I covered my eyes and backed out of my room until I got to the hall where I bolted to find my mother. More heard experience than saw, but it still gives me the creeps to think about. When I was a kid, my family had a family reunion at a big ranch venue on the Guadalupe River, Texas. Looks and feels as old as the hills, but it was established in the late 70s, so it's not that much older than the house I grew up in. I must have been around maybe 8 at the time, but I vividly remember experiencing really weird stuff the whole weekend. Started off on the first morning we were there. I kept hearing the sound of kids' footsteps and voices running around upstairs in the main lodge, but my brother and I were some of the only kids there, and the others were out at the river. I even went so far as to investigate, but when I didn't find anyone up there, I was so royally freaked out that I refused to go back up until bedtime when I was forced. Later that day, the rest of the family was down at the river, but I didn't feel like going. There was an old playground with a few slides, some of those bad spring horse toys that are whiplash waiting to happen, and an old metal merry-go-round. I was sitting on that merry-go-round watching the river when I heard what sounded like small footsteps running in the grass behind me. I turned around to look, saw nobody there, and the footsteps were gone. Alright, that's creepy, but I decided to be brave and stick it out. Not even 2 minutes later, the footsteps start again, running directly at me. They sound quick and close together, like a child's stride. It changes from grass to mulch sounds, and then I feel the merry-go-round start to shake as if someone were running on it, accompanied by a clang 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 sound of small shoes on metal. Didn't even bother to turn around, just stood bolt upright and took off like a shot. Sprinted as hard as I could, but I felt something step on the back of my shoe and stop it with enough force that I ran clean out of it. Didn't stop, just kept running. Sprinted all the way down to the river in a teary panic and told my mom what had happened. She didn't believe me and made me go back to pick up my shoe. Basically had to drag me the whole way because I was absolutely panicked and didn't want to be anywhere near that playground. Made it through the rest of that day without encountering anything, even made it through the night. But when I was woken up in the morning for breakfast, my brother had already gone downstairs. I had been sleeping on the top bunk of a bunk bed, but when I started to move, I heard small footsteps in the hallway again. I quickly went to scramble down the ladder, but the ladder started thunking and shaking like someone was climbing up toward me. I jumped clear off the side of the bed and sprinted down the stairs, but didn't even bother telling anyone that time because I knew they wouldn't believe me. Went back to that camp back in 2012 on a trip with a buddy of mine, and it's been massively updated and modernized by now. That fleabing playground is still there though, and it still gave me the creeps. About 4 or 5 years ago, one of my good friend's family moved into a new house which was on a big plot of open land. He had acres of land, and the area was rumored to be an Indian burial ground. Of course, being 18, all of my friends didn't believe that type of stuff, and there were no issues. Well, after about a month of living there, my friend started telling us about weird dreams he had. Whatever, he's crazy, we thought. So he invites us to stay the night, and about 4 of us go to party and sleep there, so we didn't have to drive drunk. We all had the same exact dream that night we stayed that he described a week earlier. Well, we start to tell others at school, and this one girl wants to come during the day to check out the new place. We start telling her in broad daylight about the weird things going on that we experienced. Well, he has a glass lamp on the ceiling and a glass table right below it. My friend who lived there joked and said, "If there are ghosts here, that glass light will fall through this table and shatter that glass one day, I know it." And the girl says, "I'd like to see that," and as soon as she finished her statement, the light falls out of the ceiling, hits the glass table, shatters both pieces of glass, and broken glass is everywhere. We were speechless. It was about 4 in the afternoon and hotter and sunnier than all heck. WTF. Wife and I chartered a boat in Key West one day to do some snorkeling and hit some sandbars. We were 6 miles west of Key West in about 3 feet of water when I noticed a hard shadow moving very slowly about 50 yards, maybe. Hard to say for sure, away from us. For whatever reason, I was drawn to watching the shadow because it was out of place of anything I'd seen all day. I watched it for several minutes. Well, suddenly, an orange face pops up out of the water and looks at me. It was far enough away that I couldn't make out any features. We stare at each other for maybe 10 seconds, then the head drops back into the water and the hard shadow takes off for deeper water at an unbelievable speed. Never saw it again. Wife was snorkeling and didn't see it. I didn't mention it to the captain. Was it a mermaid? Maybe. Working in the North Georgia mountains land surveying. As my boss and I are wandering through the woods doing what we do, both of us become very quiet, which is pretty normal for us. But everything around us fell silent as well. Birds, no chirp. Bugs, no hum from cicadas or crickets. No squirrels rumbling around. No sound. Which both of us knew is not good. We are looking at each other and we both hear whispers, but we can't tell what words are being said. Continue walking and clearly we both hear a loud stop. We both stop dead in our tracks and say nothing. While looking around we notice 4, probably more that we didn't notice, Indian graves. We were about to walk on them. We packed up for the day, and as we loaded the truck the nature noises all came back. Nothing strange happened when we went to finish the project.